In our last Zoom session together, we mentioned that the observance of Shabbat consists of two primary elements, signified by the Hebrew word zachor, remember the Sabbath day, and the Hebrew word shamor, keep, observe, safeguard the Sabbath day. It is through these two aspects of the Shabbat that the holiday is sanctified and is given special significance in our life. As we mentioned in last week's session, the commandment Zachor is a positive commandment. It reminds us to remember the Sabbath, and according to our rabbis, the way in which we primarily remember the Sabbath is in the prayer that is recited for the Sabbath over a cup of wine on the Sabbath day. The primary prayer is on Friday evening, a secondary prayer on Saturday afternoon before our second meal. And that prayer, called the Kiddush, is the way in which we formally Zachor, remember the Sabbath day. But we discussed as well, if you remember in our Zoom session, that there are other ways in which we can also remember the Shabbat, lighting Shabbat candles, eating 3 festive meals, preparing ourselves and our homes for the Sabbath day, spending the Sabbath in an atmosphere of holiness, praying and studying, eating meals with our family, receiving guests. All of these are ways in which we remember and honor the Sabbath day. The second commandment, however, is the commandment Shamor, to keep or observe the Sabbath day. That is categorized as a negative commandment, which means that it is a commandment which tells us what not to do. Specifically, we are not to engage in any of a series of activities which is regarded by the Torah as forbidden forms of labor or work. As we will come to see in our discussion this week, there are 39 such categories of labor, and each of these forms of work, which are referred to by a technical term in Hebrew, the term is malacha. Each of these forms of work are activities which we are prohibited to engage in from the onset of the Shabbat on Friday evening all the way through the end of the Shabbat day on Saturday evening with the Havdalah. Now the question, of course, is where do these 39 categories of work come from? How did the rabbis come up, first of all, with the number 39? And how did they decide what forms of work, what forms of labor were prohibited on the Sabbath day? To understand that, we have to go back to the Torah, and we have to look at a institution that was created by the Jewish people just shortly after their experience at Mount Sinai. Because the word malacha, work, is a concept which is derived from the labors involved in the building of a desert tabernacle called the Mishkan, that the Jewish people were commanded shortly after the period of Mount Sinai. Let me review that history briefly for you. On the 50th day after they came out of the land of Egypt, the Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai, and there they had the very powerful, emotional experience of standing at the base of the mountain in the midst of the thunder and the lightning and being addressed by God himself and receiving the first of the 10 commandments. At the end of this experience, the Jewish people had thoroughly committed itself to being God's people. They had entered into a covenant. And after this moment of revelation, Moses goes up to Mount Sinai in order to receive the 2 tablets, the 2 stone tablets, upon which are recorded these 10 commandments, as a sign of the covenant between God and the Jewish people. Now, Moses, according to the account in the book of Exodus, is on Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights. He has left the people under the care of Aaron, his brother, but he has not told them how long he will be gone and when he will be coming back. Consequently, we begin to see that as the weeks pass, and Moses has not returned, the Jewish people become more and more frightened. Where is the man who has led us from Egypt? Where is the man who speaks to us in God's name? Where is the leader who is supposed to lead us through this wilderness and bring us to the land that God has promised? And as the weeks pass and Moses fails to appear, the people become more and more afraid. They think that Moses has left them, has abandoned them. Perhaps something has happened to him. but now they are left directionless, like sheep without a shepherd in a wilderness that they have never known. And so the people begin to fear, and when they fear, they turn to their old ways. They say to Aaron, Moses' brother, "This man Moses, who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him. And now we do not know what to do, where to go, how God wants us to continue on." And they prevail upon Aaron, Moses' brother, to build a substitute messenger, a substitute intercessor for Moses. It's not that they're creating a new God, they accept God, but since Moses is gone, they say to Aaron, "Build us a representation of God so that God may speak to us and tell us what we are to do and how we are to proceed." Aaron at first attempts to dissuade the people from this violation of the first and the second of the Ten Commandments. They are literally asking to make a representation of God, a kind of a false God. But finally, seeing that the people are more and more upset and close to a point of rebellion, Aaron agrees. He tells the people to bring their gold, and he fashions out of the gold which the people bring something called an egel hazahav, a golden calf. And Aaron creates this object for the people, and then he tells them, let this be a representation, a symbol of God's presence among us. You say you want God present among us. You didn't see God on Mount Sinai. Moses is not here. Let this egel, which has been created from your contributions of gold, let this serve as the mediary, the intermediary between God and us. Well, what is Moses doing? At this time, he is on top of Mount Sinai. He has received the 2 tablets containing the 10 commandments, and suddenly he is informed by God that the people that he brought out of Egypt has suddenly gone astray. They have built themselves an idol, a foreign god, and they have turned quickly from the commandment which God had only recently, 40 days before, given them. God is angry. Moses is distressed. He goes down from the mountain, discovers in fact that his people are worshiping this idol, this golden calf that they have created. And in his anger, Moses destroys the first set of tablets at the base of Mount Sinai, castigates the people who also suffer punishment for their transgression. In the aftermath of this tragic event, God recognizes that the Jewish people need some kind of visible symbol, some kind of representation in their midst that will always remind them that if Moses or another leader is not there, that God always dwells in the midst of the camp. And just after the episode of the Egel HaZahab, the golden calf, God says to Moses something else. He says, tell the people to bring offerings. And then he says in Hebrew, Ve'asu li mikdash ve'shachanti betocham. Let them make me a sanctuary that I might dwell among them. In other words, if the people need my visible presence, even though I, God, have no visible presence, let them build a mishkan, a tabernacle, and let that be the symbol that I dwell in the midst of the people of Israel. And that is, in fact, what the people did. In chapters 25 through 27, in the book of Exodus, you can find a full description of everything that they built: the Ark of the Covenant, the table of the showbread, the menorah, the altars, the curtains for the courtyard of the temple, and a whole elaborate Mishkan system which they build to serve as a representation of God. And finally, by the way, when they have completed the task, symbolically the cloud of God settles on the Mishkan to indicate that God is present among the people. Now, it is the work that was involved in building the Mishkan that specifically we are prohibited from doing on the Sabbath. If you want to know what categorizes, what is considered a category of work that we are forbidden to perform on Shabbat, the answer is any kind of work that was done in order to build, to create, to put together, to assemble the Mishkan, any form of work that was involved in constructing the Mishkan, That specific kind of work was a kind of work which was forbidden to be done by the Jewish people in perpetuity on the Shabbat. Okay? And it turns out that when you go through the categories of work, there are 39 general categories of work involved, although there are many subcategories, many additional items that can be derived from the 39 major categories. There are 39 categories of work which will now become prohibited on the Sabbath day. So we see now that the obligation to cease from malacha on Shabbat refers not just to work in general, it refers to a very specific kind of creative activity that is directly related to the building of the Mishkan, which came to represent, among the camp of Israel, God's abiding presence in the midst of the Jewish people. This is the material that is going to serve as a preface for us to discuss the whole question of Shabbat, of labor, of why we are prohibited from doing labor on Shabbat, and why this prohibition of work was taken so seriously. I am going to ask you to consider only two questions as we read the material for this week. Remember, you are only reading at this point the Jonathan Sacks introduction. I think it's 27 pages in total. If you have not yet read the material, this would be an excellent time to read all of the pages in order to prepare for our discussion this coming Wednesday evening. Now, the question that I want you to think about, and if you want to go back to Exodus chapters 25 to 27, you may do so. If you want to go back to look at the episode of the Golden Calf, you may do so. But here's what I want you to think about. How is the building of the Mishkan, this tabernacle structure in the desert, how is the building of the Mishkan and the labor that was involved related to the idea of forbidden labor on Shabbat? In other words, why should it be that the very labor, the holy labor involved in building a abode, a habitat for God, why should that very holy labor be forbidden on Shabbat? There's a relationship. Yes, it was for a certain purpose. It was for a holy purpose, to build the tabernacle. Why then is specifically that kind of work forbidden on Shabbat? And the second question concerns a question that some of you had this past week. How does our understanding of this understanding of forbidden labor on Shabbat, how does our understanding of that help us to explain the severe punishments that the Torah prescribes for a person who violates Shabbat? As you know, the Torah is very explicit. The violation of Shabbat is a very, very serious transgression, one of the most serious actually found in the Torah. In light of what we have learned about work, malacha, the Mishkan, how are we to understand why the Torah places such a severe prohibition upon any manner of work on the Shabbat, and what is this supposed to tell us about the significance of the Sabbath day? These are the ideas that we will consider this coming week at our 7 o'clock chat room discussion. Thank you. I look forward to seeing all of you there.